Learn Fast Chapter 3. 10 Principles of Effective Learning. No problem can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. Voltaire, as we discussed in Chapter 1, learning isn't the same thing as skill acquisition. That, however, doesn't mean learning isn't important. Doing a bit of research before you jump into practice can save you precious time, energy, and emotional fortitude. Learning makes your practice more efficient, which lets you spend more of your practice time working on the most important sub-skills first. In that spirit, here are the 10 major principles of effective learning. 1. Research the skill and related topics. 2. Jump in over your head. 3. Identify mental models and mental hooks. 4. Imagine the opposite of what you want. 5. Talk to practitioners to set expectations. 6. Eliminate distractions in your environment. 7. Use spaced repetition and reinforcement for memorization. 8. Create scaffolds and checklists. 9. Make and test predictions. 10. Honor your biology. 1. Research the skill and related topics. Spend 20 minutes searching the web, browsing a bookstore, or scanning the stacks at your local library for books and resources related to the skill. The goal is to identify at least 3 books, instructional DVDs, courses, or other resources that appear to be connected to the skill you're trying to acquire. Before you panic, understand that you don't have to spend hours memorizing these resources. On the contrary, time spent reading or watching is not time spent practicing. You are not cramming for an exam. The intent of this early research is to identify the most important sub-skills, critical components, and required tools for practices as quickly as possible. The more you know in advance about the skill, the more intelligently you can prepare. The goal is to collect a wide body of knowledge about the skill as quickly as possible, creating an accurate overview of what the skill acquisition process will look like. For rapid skill acquisition, skimming is better than deep reading. By noticing ideas and tools that come up over and over again in different texts, you can trust the accuracy of the patterns you notice and prepare your practice accordingly. If you want to be able to bake the perfect croissant, pick up a few good books related to baking and pastries. Instead of reinventing the process, you'll find existing techniques that have been perfected over many years by the masters of the field. If you see the same technique or process described in multiple resources, chances are good it's important to know. Once you've found what appear to be the most useful techniques, you can experiment with them in your own kitchen, saving you a ton of trial and error. 2. Jump in over your head. Some of your early research will contain concepts, techniques, and ideas you don't understand. Often, something will appear particularly important, but you'll have no idea what it means. You'll read words you don't recognize, and see practitioners doing things you can't fathom. Don't panic. Your initial confusion is completely normal. In fact, it's great. Move for the confusion. Early research is one of the best ways to identify critical sub-skills and ideas, but it's also very likely you won't know what they mean yet. The meaning comes later, once you've started practicing. Dr. Stephen Krashen, the language acquisition expert I mentioned earlier, calls this comprehensible input. By default, the new information you're consuming isn't very comprehensible, since it's not connected to anything you know or have experienced. Over time, the same information will become comprehensible once you have some experience under your belt. In the words of renowned yoga teacher TK5 Dizikachar, the recognition of confusion is itself a form of clarity. Noticing you're confused is valuable. Recognizing confusion can help you define exactly what you're confused about, which helps you figure out what you'll need to research or do next to resolve the confusion. If you're not confused by at least half of your early research, you're not learning as quickly as you're capable of learning. If you start to feel intimidated or hesitant about the pace you're attempting, you're on the right track. Provided you're working on a lovable problem or project, the more confused you are at the outset, the more internal pressure you'll feel to figure things out, and the faster you'll learn. Not being willing to jump in over your head is the single biggest emotional barrier to rapid skill acquisition. Feeling stupid isn't fun, but reminding yourself that you will understand with practice will help you move from confusion to clarity as quickly as possible. 3. Identify mental models and mental hooks. As you conduct your research, you'll naturally begin to notice patterns, ideas, and techniques that come up over and over again. These concepts are called mental models, and they're very important. Mental models are the most basic unit of learning, a way of understanding and labeling an object or relationship that exists in the world. As you collect accurate mental models, it becomes easier to anticipate what will happen when you take a specific action. Mental models also make it much easier to discuss your experiences with others. Here's an example. I was recently helping my father set up a website. As I went along, I tried to explain what I was doing. At first, it was frustrating for both of us. I kept using words like server, and he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. Once Dad learned that a server is a special computer that delivers a web page to people who request it, and that the server was a different computer than the machine we were using, he found it much easier to understand what we were doing. In this case, server is a mental model. Once you're familiar with the term, it's easier to understand the process of publishing a website. You'll also notice a few things that look like something you're already familiar with. These are mental hooks, analogies, and metaphors you can use to remember new concepts. In the case of web servers, imagine a librarian. When you go to the library and request a specific book, a librarian will search shelves containing hundreds or thousands of books to find the exact book you're looking for. When the librarian finds the book, he or she brings it back for you. If the book can't be found, the librarian will tell you I can't find the book you're looking for. That's exactly how web servers work. When you request a specific web page, the server will search for that page in memory. If it finds the page, it will deliver it to you. If the server can't find the web page, it will return a message, error 400 or page not found. Thinking of the server software as a computer librarian is helpful when thinking about how the system works. The more mental models and mental hooks you can identify in your early research, the easier it will be to use them while you're practicing. 4. Imagine the opposite of what you want. A counterintuitive way to gain insight into a new skill is to contemplate disaster, not perfection. What if you did everything wrong? What if you got the worst possible outcome? This is a problem-solving technique called inversion, and it's helpful in learning the essentials of almost anything. By studying the opposite of what you want, you can identify important elements that are immediately obvious. Take whitewater kayaking. What would I need to know if I wanted to be able to kayak in a large, fast-moving, rock-strewn river? Here's the inversion. What would it look like if everything went wrong? I'd flip upside down underwater and not be able to get back up. I'd flood my kayak, causing it to sink or swamp, resulting in a total loss of the kayak. I'd lose my paddle, eliminating my maneuverability. I'd hit my head on a rack. I'd eject from my kayak, get stuck in a hydraulic point in the river, where the river flows back on itself, creating a loop like a washing machine and not be able to get out. If I managed to do all of these things at once in the middle of a raging river, I'd probably got a worst-case scenario. This depressing line of thought is useful because it points to a few whitewater kayaking skills that are probably very important. Learning to roll the kayak right side up if it flips, without ejecting. Learning how to prevent swamping the kayak if ejecting is necessary. Learning how to avoid losing my paddle in rough water. Learning and using safety precautions when rafting around large racks. Scouting the river before the run to avoid dangerous river features entirely. This mental simulation also gives me a shopping list. I'd need to invest in a flotation vest, helmet, and other safety gear. Now, instead of one raft river to have fun free don't die, I have a concrete list of sub-skills to practice and actions to take to ensure I actually have fun, keep my gear, and survive the trip. Inversion works. 5. Talk to practitioners to set expectations. Early learning helps you set appropriate expectations. What does reasonable performance for a beginner actually look like? When you jump into acquiring a new skill, it's very common to underestimate the complexity of the task or the number of elements involved that are required to perform well. If the skill involves the possibility of social prestige, the associated mystique can also cloud early expectations. Many wannabe rock stars have picked up an electric guitar, only to find it's extremely difficult to play well, sing on key, and look fabulous at the same time. Part of the problem is that being a rock star isn't a single skill. It's a bundle of many related sub-skills, each of which will require dedicated practice to develop. Talking to people who have acquired the skill before you will help dispel myths and misconceptions before you invest your time and energy. By knowing what you can expect to see as you progress, you'll find it much easier to sustain your interest in practice and avoid becoming discouraged early in the process. 6. Eliminate distractions in your environment. Distractions are enemy number 1 of rapid skill acquisition. Distractions kill focused practice, and lack of focused practice leads to slow or non-existent skill acquisition. You can preempt this by taking a few minutes to anticipate and eliminate or reduce as many distractions as possible before you start practicing. The most significant sources of distraction come in two forms, electronic and biological. Your television, phone, and internet are electronic distractions. Turn them off, unplug them, block them, or otherwise remove them from your environment while you're practicing unless they're absolutely necessary for the practice itself. Well-meaning family members, colleagues, and pets are biological distractions. You can't turn people off, but you can let them know in advance that you'll be unavailable while you're practicing, which makes it more likely they'll respect your practice time without interrupting. The fewer distractions you have while practicing, the more quickly you'll acquire the skill. 7. Use spaced repetition and reinforcement for memorization. To make use of material you've learned while practicing, you have to be able to recall related ideas quickly. Many skills require at least some level of memorization. Here's the catch, your memory isn't perfect. Whenever you learn something new, you'll probably forget it, unless you review the concept within a certain period of time. This repetition reinforces the idea, and helps your brain consolidate it into long-term memory. Researchers have found that memory follows a decay curve. New concepts need to be reinforced regularly, but the longer you've known a concept, the less regularly you need to review it to maintain accurate recall. Spaced repetition and reinforcement is a memorization technique that helps you systematically review important concepts and information on a regular basis. Ideas that are difficult to remember are reviewed often, while easier and older concepts are reviewed less often. Flashcard software programs like Anki, OneSuper Memo, 2 and Smarter 3 make spaced repetition and reinforcement very simple. Spaced repetition systems rely on a flashcard model of review, and you have to create the flashcards yourself. By creating flashcards as you're deconstructing the skill, you're killing two birds with one stone. Once you've created your flashcards, it only takes a few minutes each day to review them. By systematizing the review process and tracking recall, these systems can help you learn new ideas, techniques, and processes in record time. If you review the decks consistently, you'll memorize necessary concepts and ideas extremely quickly. It's important to note that skill acquisition is usually much more involved than academic learning. If you're primarily interested in memorizing concepts, ideas, or vocabulary in order to pass an exam, you don't need much more than spaced repetition for. The best use of this technique is in instances where fast recall of information is essential. If you're learning common vocabulary words in order to acquire a new language, spaced repetition and reinforcement is valuable. In instances where fast recall isn't crucial, you're usually better off skipping the flashcards in favor of maximizing practice and experimentation time. 8. Create scaffolds and checklists. Many skills involve some sort of routine, setting up, preparing, maintaining, putting away, etc. Creating a simple system is the best way to ensure these important elements happen with as little additional effort as possible. Checklists are handy for remembering things that must be done every time you practice. They're a way to systematize the process, which frees your attention to focus on more important matters. Scaffolds are structures that ensure you approach the skill the same way every time. Think of the basketball player who establishes a pre-free throw routine. Wipe hands on pants, loosen the shoulders, catch the ball from the ref, bounce 3 times, pause for 3 seconds, and shoot. That's a scaffold. Creating scaffolds and checklists makes your practice more efficient. They also make your practice easier to visualize, which helps you take advantage of mental rehearsal, which can help with some forms of physical practice. 9. Make and test predictions. Part of the skill acquisition process involves experimentation, trying new things to see if they work. The true test of useful learning is prediction. Based on what you know, can you guess how a change or experiment will turn out before you do it? Getting into the habit of making and testing predictions will help you acquire skills more rapidly. It's a variation on a scientific method, with 4 key elements. Observations: what are you currently observing? Knowns: what do you know about the topic already? Hypotheses: what do you think will improve your performance? Tests: what are you going to try next? I recommend using a notebook or other reference tool to track your experiments and form hypotheses as you practice. By keeping track of your predictions and generating new ideas, you'll have more fruitful experiments to test. 10. Honor your biology. Your brain and body are biological systems that have biological needs: food, water, exercise, rest, and sleep. It's very easy to push yourself too hard, which is counterproductive. Without the proper inputs, your body and mind won't produce useful output. According to Tony Schwartz, author of The Power of Full Engagement 2004, and Be Excellent at Anything 2011, the optimal learning cycle appears to be approximately 90 minutes of focused concentration. Any more, and your mind and body will naturally need a break. Use that opportunity to exercise, rest, have a meal or snack, take a nap, or do something else. This principle dovetails very nicely with practicing by the clock. By setting your timer for 60 to 90 minutes before you start practicing or researching, it will be easier to remember to take a break when you're done. You can also split your practices into several smaller parts, with a short break in the middle if needed. 20 minutes of practice, 10-minute break, 20 minutes of practice, 10-minute break, etc. Stacking the deck: there ain't no rules around here. We are trying to accomplish something. Thomas Edison, inventor. You won't need to use all of these principles for every skill you acquire, but you'll always find at least a few of them essential. I find it's useful to think of these principles as a secondary checklist. Whenever you decide to acquire a new skill, just review this checklist and decide which principles apply to your project. Here's the checklist for effective learning. Research the skill and related topics. Jump in over your head. Identify mental models and mental hooks. Imagine the opposite of what you want. Talk to practitioners to set expectations. Eliminate distractions in your environment. Use spaced repetition and reinforcement for memorization. Create scaffolds and checklists. Make and test predictions. Honor your biology. That's it. Apply this checklist to your current prime skill and you'll learn what you need to know to practice efficiently and effectively. Putting theory into practice: how vain it is to sit down to write when you have not stood up to live. Henry David Thoreau. Enough theory, it's time for practice. We've already covered the basics of rapid skill acquisition, but knowing how to do these things isn't nearly as important as actually doing them. Remember, no practice, no skill acquisition. Instead of going on and on about the theory of skill acquisition, I'll show you how to actually do it. I'm going to use these principles to acquire several new skills, and you'll have a front row seat. Here are the skills I intend to acquire: yoga, developing a home Asana practice; programming, creating a function web application; typing, relearning to touch type with a non-standard keyboard layout; strategy, playing Go, the world's oldest and most complex board game; music, playing the ukulele; windsurfing, sailing and maneuvering on flat water. I have no experience with any of these skills. Using the techniques and methods I just described, my goal is to acquire each of them in 30 days or less. My estimated time of acquiring each of these skills is approximately 20 hours, averaging 60 to 90 minutes of practice each day. About these examples, these particular skills are completely idiosyncratic. They're things I'm interested in learning for various reasons, which I'll explain later in detail. The skills you want to acquire may be quite different, but the core skill acquisition process will be largely the same. My hope is that in showing you how I've used this process to acquire many different skills in many different areas, you'll come away with a more complete understanding of how to use these techniques to get better at the skills that matter to you. If you're naturally more interested in one or two of these examples over the others, that's okay. Read those chapters first. If you start reading a chapter and find the skill boring or not applicable to your situation, feel free to skip it. I'm using the same core method for all of these examples, so you won't miss any crucial parts of the approach. I'm writing these chapters in tutorial format, under the assumption you've never seen these skills before, so you don't have to have any experience or prior knowledge to follow along. In addition to illustrating the method, I hope you're also able to take away some valuable knowledge about 6 interesting skills that are worth practicing. If you have a lot of experience in one of these subjects, it's likely you'll notice an error in my understanding, a mistake in my verbiage, or a disagreement with my method. That's totally fine. Remember, I'm starting as a complete beginner, and I don't know what I'm doing. Yet, what you'll read is an overview of my learning process for each of these skills. I've made every attempt to ensure the information in this book is accurate and complete, but I'm bound to make mistakes. In all cases, the method of research and deliberate practice is what's most important. First up, yoga.